My God, they're laughing. In the vast mansion, silent as a tomb for so long, millionaire Ethan Hawthorne froze at the sound he thought he would never hear again, the laughter of his twin sons. He rushed toward the room, heart pounding, and stopped dead when he saw Naomi, the maid he had always thought so ordinary, kneeling on the floor, pulling a rope, carrying the two boys on her back like a cowboy game. Their laughter burst out, shattering the years of mourning. But that moment was also the spark that ignited a lawsuit broadcast live on national television. Would today's laughter become tomorrow's verdict? A scream tore through the night. Caleb shot up from bed, his breath ragged, as if drowning in a furious wave. Tiny fingers clutched the blanket, wide eyes staring without recognizing the familiar room. In a split second, Ethan switched on the hallway light, bare feet pounding toward his son's room, his heart seizing as though it might stop altogether. He was far too familiar with nights like this. Nights when money, technology, private doctors, or sleep monitors were all useless. The screams always came back, stabbing into the silence of the vast mansion like knives. Ethan raised his hand to reach for the phone, ready to call the night doctor. But just then, a smaller figure moved faster than him. Naomi, the maid he had thought only capable of dusting and brewing tea, burst into the room. She didn't panic, didn't reach for the switch. Instead, she dropped to her knees beside the bed, her hands clasping Caleb's trembling ones. She pulled a rope from the corner of the room, an ordinary toy she often left for the children, and deftly wrapped it around his wrist. Each loop was slow, steady, like a secret code only the two of them knew. Caleb was still sobbing, but his eyes began to blink, as if a faint light had just been kindled in the fog of memory. The wailing softened into broken hiccups, then fell silent. The boy clutched the rope and burrowed into Naomi's arms, as though he had found an anchor in the storm. Noah, his twin brother, sat up from the other bed, quietly crawled over, and slipped into her embrace. It all happened in just minutes, yet for Ethan it stretched into a lifetime. He stood frozen in the hallway, phone still in hand, never having dialed. The beam of hallway light spilled into the room, illuminating his sons' faces. No longer contorted in terror, they now rested peacefully on Naomi's shoulder. On their lips, a fragile smile flickered, shaky, fleeting, but real. Ethan's chest tightened. All his life, he believed money could solve anything. Hiring the best doctors, installing the most advanced devices, paying for the most expensive therapies. Never had he imagined that an old rope, a simple embrace, could reach where wealth never could. Standing there, he felt strangely small, a man who owned a corporation, yet powerless against the night terrors of his sons. And now, a woman with flour, still dusting her apron, was doing what he could not. In that moment, a part of Ethan's pride cracked. Naomi lifted her gaze briefly, meeting Ethan's eyes in the hallway. There was no pride, no defiance, just a simple look that seemed to say, they only need someone here. Then she bent down, softly humming a wordless lullaby, like the whisper of wind through the window. Slowly, the twins drifted back to sleep, arms still wrapped around the rope. Ethan remained motionless. He felt like a stranger in his own house, a latecomer to a sacred ritual someone else had begun. Bitterness and gratitude swelled in his chest, tangled together. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that miracles did not come from power or prestige, but from quiet presence in a small room. The door closed, and the hallway light swallowed Ethan once again. He turned slowly, his heart beating in a new rhythm, trembling, but also hopeful. And before we continue with the main story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. Morning light streamed through the wide glass panels, painting long golden streaks across the cold wooden floor. Ethan descended the stairs with his usual routine, bracing himself for another bleak, silent day. He was accustomed to heavy breakfasts where the clatter of knife and fork rang like hollow metal. But today, by the third step, he heard something else. The bubbling laughter of children. He froze. His heart beat faster than usual, as if afraid he had imagined it. The sound was clear, bright, filling the kitchen space. He took a few more steps, eyes widening at a scene he had never seen before. Naomi, flour still dusting her apron, stood at the kitchen counter. On the table lay small pancakes cut into the shapes of bunny ears and bear faces. Beside them, fruit arranged into stars and moons, an entire sweet universe for children. Caleb and Noah sat on either side, cheeks sticky with honey, plastic forks in hand, eyes shining. Naomi held the rope in her hands, twirling it lightly as she put on a Texas cowboy drawl. Yee-haw! Pretending to pull the boys in circles. The twins clutched their bellies, laughing until their faces turned red. A piece of pancake dropped, and the family puppy darted in to snatch it, which only made the laughter louder. Ethan found himself laughing too, though he quickly swallowed it back, afraid of breaking the spell. He slid quietly onto the long bench. For the first time in years, he felt the morning had a taste, the smell of warm batter, ripe oranges, the fragrance of childhood he thought had died with his wife. The kitchen no longer resembled a lifeless showroom but a living space, where hearts beat to the rhythm of children. In the midst of laughter, Noah accidentally knocked a stack of crayons to the floor. Ethan bent to pick them up. On one sheet, in shaky, clumsy letters, was written, Maya. He froze. It was the name of their mother, the woman he had loved, the woman the boys barely remembered. His hand brushed over the word as though reaching for his lost wife. His eyes blurred. Naomi glanced at him, saying nothing, only smiling softly. A simple smile, yet profound, as if she already knew. The children hadn't forgotten. They just hadn't found the way to remember. And now, these crayon letters were the bridge between memory and the present. Ethan placed the paper on the table, his chest heavy yet strangely lighter. He realized Naomi wasn't just cleaning the house, washing clothes, or cooking breakfast. She was quietly tidying up the shattered pieces of memory, gathering them, piecing them together into a picture strong enough for the boys and for him to look at without breaking. He sat still, watching the scene like a parched man staring at a spring. Every smile, every giggle, was a drop of water on the barren ground inside him. A thought flashed across his mind, both terrifying and hopeful. Perhaps Naomi was the cure he had been searching for all along. Not doctors, not therapy, not technology, but presence. A heart unafraid of touching another's wounds. Ethan leaned slightly, resting his elbow on the table, and caught Caleb's eyes. The boy gave a shy smile before burying his face back into the bunny-shaped pancake. That smile made Ethan's heart tremble. A small miracle, but enough to make him believe not everything was lost. The kitchen bustled as if darkness had never existed. Yet deep down, Ethan knew this happiness was fragile. Any prying gaze from the outside world could shatter it. He shivered not from fear, but from a premonition that storms were near. Would the world beyond accept this laughter, or would it soon turn into a weapon against the very woman who had brought it to life? One sunny morning, Naomi took the boys to the park near the house. The rope was loosely tied into a loop, and Caleb and Noah took turns holding on, giggling as Naomi carried them both on her back, pretending to be a wild horse. Tiny footprints dotted the dew-kissed grass. Passers-by glanced back and smiled. It was such a peaceful, ordinary sight that no one could have guessed that just hours later it would ignite a media storm. A paparazzi lens captured that moment. With a single click, innocent laughter was frozen as evidence. By that afternoon, tabloid sites splashed the photo with bold headlines. Billionaire's children ride the maid like a horse. In the comments sections, thousands of opinions erupted: mockery, criticism, even speculation over whether Ethan had lost control of his household after his wife's death. At Ethan's company headquarters, chaos broke out. Investors called non-stop. The PR department worked through the night. The image of his children riding the maid's back spread endlessly, turned into memes across social media. People who had never heard of Ethan now debated his private life as if they knew it better than he did. Back at the mansion, Ethan sat before the screen, staring at the cropped photo, a sharp pain in his chest. He knew the truth. It wasn't an act of humiliation, but one of the rare moments his sons had truly laughed. Yet, in the world of wealth and reputation, truth was often the least valued thing. The next day, the board meeting convened. The long, cold room with its rows of leather chairs felt like a panel of invisible judges. At the head of the table, his mother, the children's grandmother, adjusted her glasses, her voice icy. "This is a disgrace. You need to dismiss her immediately." Ethan sat motionless. In his mind, images of Naomi kneeling beside Caleb during a nightmare, Noah's pure laughter at the breakfast table, returned one by one. Things his money had never been able to buy. He wanted to speak, but his throat closed. The eyes around the table, shareholders, partners, lawyers, pressed down like 1,000 needles, forcing him to choose image over truth. One board member leaned forward, tone half mocking. "If you don't act, the stock could plummet, all because of a maid. A billionaire can't let personal feelings outweigh corporate duty." Silence weighed heavy. Ethan clenched his fists, nails biting into skin. They didn't see or refused to see that his son's laughter was worth more than any financial chart. But he also knew, if he defied them, the storm would hit not only him but Naomi as well. Outside, the press waited for every move. A young journalist had just tweeted, "This will be interesting. Let's see if the billionaire chooses reputation or his children's laughter." That single line struck the deepest part of Ethan's heart. He lifted his head. His mother's gaze stayed cold. The boardroom remained merciless, and on his phone screen the photo still burned into millions of eyes. Ethan knew his decision would shape everything, not just the future of his company, but the soul of his family. All right, my dear viewers, if you're watching and finding this story interesting, drop a comment with the number 1 or write, "I'm still here to keep listening." The sound of camera shutters rattled like tiny gunfire on a battlefield. Outside the New York family courthouse, dozens of reporters crowded together, microphones thrust high, flashbulbs exploding without pause. A headline scrolled across court television, "Billionaire family scandal, housekeeper on trial." A private family story had now become a public performance for all of America. The courtroom doors swung open. Naomi stepped in, hair neatly tied back, her face composed, though her eyes betrayed flickers of unease. She sat at the defendant's chair, fingers interlaced tightly in her lap as though binding her own trembling. Across from her in the plaintiff's row, the grandmother sat tall in a deep blue dress, posture rigid, expression as unyielding as a verdict carved in stone. The chamber was packed, small cameras perched in every corner, ready to broadcast each furrowed brow, each glance to millions of viewers outside. Ethan sat quietly in the back, his black suit perfectly pressed, yet his hands clenched until they turned pale. He had never felt weaker than now, not before shareholders, not before the press, but before the fear that his sons might lose the only light they had just rediscovered. The trial began. The grandmother's attorney spoke. Naomi had overstepped her role as housekeeper, turning a simple game into a danger to the health and dignity of the children. Words as sharp as blades, slicing through the innocence of park laughter and recasting it as incriminating evidence. The cameras panned to Naomi. She didn't flare up. She sat still, her gaze drifting as though through the walls, reaching for Caleb and Noah at home, likely waiting for her bedtime story. For a moment, her lips pressed into the thinnest of smiles, a fragile shield against the storm inside. Ethan watched it all. He saw the nods of agreement ripple through the courtroom. He saw the tweets pop across reporters' screens. A maid carrying rich kids on her back appropriate? He heard whispers behind him. A CEO like Ethan? And he let this happen? Inside him, everything pulled taut as a string. All his life, Ethan had lived within the safe fortress of power, where every decision was measured in numbers. But now, what he saw before him were Naomi's tear-streaked eyes as she soothed Caleb in a dark hallway, the bright morning laughter in the kitchen, the shaky crayon letters spelling Maya, summoning memories of his late wife. He knew if he stayed silent, Naomi would take the full weight of society's judgment. If he spoke, he would face the scrutiny of shareholders, media, even his own family. The judge's gavel struck. A witness was called. The entire courtroom turned toward Ethan. In that instant, time froze. The camera zoomed in on his face, eyes tinged red, lips trembling. He drew in a breath and rose. The leather chair groaned behind him, echoing like the curtain rising on a grand play. He stepped toward the witness stand, each stride heavy yet resolute. In his mind echoed a single question. How many fathers in this nation have wished they were brave enough to protect a child's laughter over a hollow reputation? The camera lights flared across Ethan's face. Outside, millions of viewers leaned in, waiting to see whether the powerful billionaire would choose safe silence or dare to speak the truth. Are you still with me, my dear viewers? Take a moment to relax, maybe sip a glass of water, and then keep listening to this story. Drop a 1-inch the comments if you find it fascinating. And don't forget to hit subscribe to the channel. The courtroom air felt stretched thin, every breath audible. When the grandmother's attorney finished his indictment, the judge tapped the gavel lightly, his calm voice breaking the silence. Mr. Hawthorne, would you like to speak? In that instant, dozens of lenses swung toward Ethan. Camera lights beamed onto his face, each feature etched sharp as if on a cinema screen. The relentless clicks of shutters filled the chamber, as though the entire world was waiting for him to stumble. Ethan rose. For a heartbeat, every familiar image of his life vanished the stock ticker screens, the 50th floor boardrooms, the million-dollar contracts. In their place came a single, simple memory. Naomi kneeling with the rope, his sons laughing freely in a room that had known only silence for years. The scene returned with such clarity, he could hear the giggles, smell the sweat of childhood, see the peace in their eyes. He walked to the witness stand, his shoes knocking steady beats on the wooden floor. The courtroom hushed. No whispers remained. Ethan drew in a breath, his voice hoarse yet firm. She didn't overstep. She saved my family. A heavy pause followed. He let the words settle into the four walls before continuing, eyes fixed first on the judge, then on Naomi, whose clasped hands trembled. Naomi did what no one else could. She brought laughter back into my home, something doctors, specialists, money, everything I had couldn't achieve. The cameras swept fast, catching every flicker. A reporter gaping, the grandmother's brow tightening, Naomi lowering her head, eyes glistening. Millions of viewers on court television witnessed a billionaire once sealed behind a cold image, now shedding his armor of pride. Ethan stopped, then lifted his gaze straight into the lens, as if addressing the entire nation. I am the father of 2 children, and I know without her, I would have lost them, not their bodies, but their laughter, their childhood souls. The courtroom froze. Silence no longer carried suspicion but hung like a suspended note, waiting to fall. In the corner, a young journalist scribbled quickly. Billionaire breaks silence, chooses love over image. On social media, the hashtag number #DefendNaomi began flashing across feeds. Ethan paused, fingers knotting together, then almost laughed bitterly at himself. I once thought a father's greatness lay in protecting his family's reputation. I was wrong. Greatness is when you dare to kneel beside your child's tears and defend anyone who can make them laugh again. That sentence never entered the record, yet it carved itself into the hearts of those present. Naomi lifted her gaze, her eyes meeting Ethan's. In that fleeting moment, without words, all understood he had chosen a side, the side of truth. The chamber was so still that even a pen tapping against a notebook could be heard. The judge leaned forward, silent for longer than usual, then tapped the gavel lightly. No further words were spoken, but Millions of Americans watching knew the game had changed. Yet one question lingered. Would a single defense, however powerful, be enough to withstand the grandmother's web of influence and the crushing weight of society? Or was this merely the opening move in a far harsher battle yet to come? The final echoes of Ethan's defense still hung in the air as Naomi's attorney slowly rose to his feet. He carried no forceful tone, no sharpened aggression. Instead, he opened his briefcase and drew out a thin, weathered notebook, its corners frayed, the faded cover catching the overhead lights like a relic smudged by time. All eyes followed as the notebook was placed on the evidence stand. The camera zoomed in, magnifying the details onto the large courtroom screen. The page revealed crude crayon sketches, lopsided flowers, a crooked windowed house, and one shaky word scrawled across the paper, Leah. Naomi inhaled deeply, then rose. Her hands trembled as she stepped forward, but her eyes held a fierce resolve. When she spoke, her voice cracked, as though every word carved another cut across her heart. This is my daughter's sketchbook. Her name was Leah. She died of heart disease when she was just 8 years old. The room seemed to stop breathing. Even the clatter of reporters' keyboards slowed, as if any sound might shatter the moment. Naomi laid her hand upon the page, her finger lingering on the uneven letters. A single tear slid down, blotting the red crayon until it bled into the paper. I know how fragile laughter is, she whispered, though the microphone carried every syllable through the chamber and into millions of homes. I lost it once, and I swore I would never let any child around me lose it again. A ripple passed through the courtroom. Ethan, seated behind her, felt his chest seize. In that instant, Naomi was no longer the woman in a flour-stained apron from his kitchen. She was a mother who had lost everything, yet still had the courage to pour her broken heart into children who bore no blood ties to her. The camera shifted to the grandmother. Her face, once cold as marble, faltered for a fraction of a second. She masked it quickly, but the nation watching had already caught it, the tremor of a fortress cracking. An older reporter at the back of the gallery gave a slow nod. He had covered thousands of trials, yet seldom witnessed truth unveiled not through argument but through the raw offering of a shattered heart. Naomi turned back to her seat, each step heavy yet dignified. When she sat, her arms wrapped around the notebook as if cradling Leah herself. Ethan's eyes blurred as he watched. He finally understood. Naomi hadn't just brought laughter back for Caleb and Noah. She had dared to give away the most vulnerable part of herself, the motherhood once stolen from her. In that gift, he and his sons had found life again. The courtroom was draped in an uncanny silence. No cough, no shuffle. Across America, court television viewers sat frozen for a few seconds before waves of comments erupted online. This isn't just a trial. This is a mother's confession. From the shadows, Ethan leaned slightly forward, whispering to himself, barely audible, "Thank you, Naomi." But the question loomed heavy. Would truth spoken from the heart be enough to tip the scales of justice, or would the cold machinery behind the grandmother still crush it into silence? Naomi's tear had barely dried in the tense air when the judge tapped the gavel. The crisp thud cut the room in two. The court dismisses the case. The defendant is not guilty. A stir rippled through the courtroom. A few reporters leaned in, fingers clattering on keyboards. Some spectators exhaled in relief. But for Ethan, the verdict still felt incomplete. He turned to his sons beside him. Caleb and Noah, who usually shrank from crowds, now sat upright, their eyes brighter than ever. Suddenly, Noah reached for the stack of colored paper and crayons he clutched like a talisman. His small fingers fumbled, scratching color onto a blank page. Caleb leaned in, joining him. Their focus was uncanny, as though they grasped something beyond adult words. A minute later, Noah lifted the page. 3 crooked yet determined letters stood out. Mom. He walked it to the judge. The room froze. Court TV's cameras zoomed slowly in, then panned across the courtroom. Ethan, rising to his feet, eyes rimmed red, Naomi covering her mouth, shoulders shaking. The grandmother, once proud and cold, bowing her head as her aged hands trembled in her lap. Naomi's sob broke free soft, but carried by the microphone. Ethan brushed away a tear. Reporters, instead of typing, sat silent for a few seconds. On social media, millions watching wept openly, and the hashtag number verdict of the heart began to trend instantly. Legally, the trial was over. But for those hearts watching, the true verdict had just been delivered by two children who had lost their mother, who had once been robbed of laughter, now reclaiming truth with three simple letters. The judge, stern all morning, could not hide his emotion. He placed the paper before him and tapped the gavel once more, not as a ruling, but as a quiet acknowledgement of the children's voice. Naomi sat frozen, one hand over her mouth, the other clutching Leah's worn sketchbook. In that instant, her late daughter seemed present, smiling somewhere unseen. Ethan looked at Naomi, eyes heavy with words unspoken. The courtroom erupted in applause. Some rose to their feet. Flashbulbs flared again, but this time without predation, more like sparks recording a moment of hope. The grandmother remained seated, her shoulders sagging slightly. No one knew her thoughts, but her glistening eyes betrayed that even the hardest heart could be moved. Ethan wrapped an arm around his sons, pulling them close. He said nothing, but the message was plain. Truth isn't in headlines or boardrooms, but in the laughter children reclaim. The applause ebbed, but its resonance lingered. That sheet of paper with its crooked mom was more than Naomi's defense. It was a verdict truer than the judge's decree. It declared that motherhood can be chosen, written in love, not just blood. Ethan embraced his boys. Naomi pressed Leah's notebook to her chest. Under the blaze of lights, no one saw a maid, a billionaire, or a plaintiff. They saw a family forming out of loss and scars. Yet the question lingered. When the media lights dim, will they find peace, or will another storm wait outside? Today's story leaves us with a simple, profound lesson. True strength lies not in reputation, assets, or stock charts, but in protecting fragile laughter, standing on the side of truth, and knowing that sometimes a single public defense can heal the deepest private wounds. If you're watching this in the United States, share it with your loved ones. Someone may need to hear that hope and love still exist even in the darkest places. And I want to hear from you. What do you think awaits this family next? Will Naomi truly be embraced as irreplaceable, or will new trials come their way? Leave a comment with your thoughts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss part 2 of this story. Because sometimes the real story doesn't end with a courtroom verdict. It continues in each of our hearts.